This is Paul 102 Digital Monday. On Mondays, Karen Nunez Tesheira hosts the program Hard Talk. We got a very special guest. I'll allow Karen to introduce the guest and the topic, the current crime situation in Trinidad and Tobago in relation to the budget 2024-2025. Good afternoon, Karen. How are you?
Good afternoon to you, David McIntyre. And I see our guest, Darius Figueroa. He
Yes,
told
yes,
me
yes.
his pronunciation, his father, he's never seen any other name with a U, Doria. So he refuses to call himself Doria. So he's Darius Figueroa,
Yes.
of good Portuguese descent. all, all joking aside, the topic today is very serious. And in fact, we're going to start with the 2025 budget because use that as a starting point in which we can discuss a topic which both he and I have spoken one time, and I know that this is something to which is very close to him and which has devoted a lot of time and energy and writing to it, and he's no stranger to any of us. But before I introduce him formally, David, could we just have the numbers? Because you know what? People do send in comments. Last week we got a lot of comments, and I think it's increasing. I want to encourage people. This is a topic. We're dealing with crime, and you can't say you're not affected by it. But before I go into the topic and introduce Darius Figueroa formally, and no strangers that any of us, as I said, if you could give the numbers and of course encourage people to call in and to give us their comments. We will read it unless you don't want us to.
Okay. The numbers you can contact us or you can join us via 222-8255, and our toll-free number 866-525-1099, 866-525-1099. We're also streaming live on YouTube and Facebook, so you can send your comments directly to the studio, and Karen too will also see your comments, and we'll read them out for you.
Found out how to do that after a little while. That's very technical. I probably have to visit the Ministry of Digitalization, but they look like they need help because when you have to do, yeah, property tax lining up. Anyway, that's another story. I'm not going to burden our guest, Darius Figueroa, who is very well known. He's seen by some to be controversial, but you're always controversial when you speak the truth. You speak truth to power, and that is the problem. He speaks truth to power, and people want you to shut up and want to put your head in the sand, but I'm not going to do that. And certainly, Darius Figueroa, who is highly respected, he's given me the shortest bio that anyone has ever given me, but it says a lot about him and his area of focus, as it is one of my areas of focus. So is that foci? I mean, if I want to speak proper Latin language. But in any event, he got his first degree and honors from the University of the West Indies, a BA in education, followed by an MPhil, Master of Philosophy in Sociology, and has yet to await the award of his PhD, in which he submitted, I believe, since 2012. I know about that. I was in academia myself, and in fact, I was called upon to stand in as one of the persons who would determine whether I remember the term so many years ago, a particular PhD candidate when I was at Kville campus. But anyway, you have devoted yourself to that, and your PhD thesis, perhaps that has something to do with it, may have had something to do with it because your title of your 4 books have been on the illicit trade in the Caribbean, and you blog on the drug trade. And you do that, and you're really right to do that. And regardless of how many people would want you to be silent on it, we know, and I know that it is also a problem. I'm going to let you take over just now, but let me just say how I would like us to proceed if you do not mind, because I said that I would try to stand it somewhat around the budgetary measures that they gave, not only for 2025, we can start with that and work backwards. Because just to say, because having been a minister and minister of finance, every year it doesn't have to be new offerings. It had a lot of times it could be new because of course you're not going to be. It's a dynamic situation. You have to respond to that. But every year you have to go back to continue what you started, which might take 3 or 4 years to implement. With this government, it takes 10 years and even more. But that's another story. It's not another story. Actually, it's part of our discussion today. So that they have to go back to the parliament to get the parliamentary authority via the appropriation bill to spend. And although the fiscal year ends in September the 30th, you do have until the end of October. Actually, I was looking to find it, but I couldn't find exact authority for that. But I do know that budgets were presented in the month of October. Many of the budgets since this government, and I suppose previous governments have done. So that's usually the end of the fiscal year. But to bear in mind, a lot of it is giving an update of what you would have started, because a highway won't be built in a year, or any major undertaking. So that has to be factored into the discussion. But what is the issue is that year in, year out, you keep saying that you are bringing this into place by this year and nothing happened. That is the story, that's the swan song of this government, this magical government, which unfortunately, one of the things that you should be able to is to be able to trust their word, because that's what you put them there for, to have that trust. And nothing more important for many people, of course, the economy, but of course your national security. That's why just a little bit of law. That's why they call when a matter is brought in the criminal court, whether magistrates or high assizes or wherever, it's called an action in rem, not an action in personam, meaning that it's an action against the whole of society. Because if your neighbor's house is robbed, or your neighbor is murdered, or somebody down the street from you is murdered, or anybody in Trinidad is murdered or extorted or robbed, it goes to your own personal sense of security. It affects you, which is why you do not prosecute. It is the DPP that does that prosecution. I hope I'm not losing Mr. Figuera with this. That's why the DPP is the prosecutor in the matter, and he prosecutes the accused. And so that's why you see it. But the critical thing about a crime is that whether, and that's why I want to talk a little later on, Darius, about white collar crime, because in people's mind, they seem to think white collar crime is not crime. Well, I actually saw an article which we could talk about later on. It's the punishment. How you know it's a crime? Because the punishment is either jail, time in jail. It could be as little as a fine. It could be, depending on it, could be community service. But it carries a punitive element. There's a punitive element to it, and it is a creature of statute. In other words, it's not a crime unless the statute books have created it, right? Which is why they have so many pieces of legislation sitting on there and will not operationalize them, will not proclaim them, because on the proclamation, things that people may be able to do now and get away with, when these pieces of legislation are passed, they become criminal wrongs for which you can get severe punishment. So, Mr. Blarius Figuera, I think I've said enough by way of introduction, and I want to hear your views on the main cause of crime, which I feel we both share. Main cause of crime, and to what extent, let's look at this year's budget and see to what extent it has addressed in any way dealing with the main cause of crime. I'd want you to say what you think, what you believe it to be, and what measures you believe the government has put in place through the budget to treat with it.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you for inviting me once again. A very interesting topic, because in my research, every year I look forward to the national budget to gauge how the government of the day, and especially in the debates in the House after, how the government is conceptualizing the threat of criminality, because that tells us their worldview, how they're conceptualizing it, how they're conceptualizing what is driving it, etc., etc. So this year was no shocker, because from 2015 to now, the discourse remains the same. And what is very noteworthy is that those on the other side also use the same discourse, have the same worldview, and therefore they both come up with the same solutions. So there is no discernible difference between the sides of how they view what is going on in Trinidad and Tobago with the evolution of criminality. Now, this by itself is irrelevant, as any attempt you make to intervene into the terrain of criminality in our country, if you do not have an accurate approximation of reality on the ground that is driving your solution-based process. And from 2010 to present, the approximation of reality on the ground is fantasy land. It does not appreciate what is going on the ground and the rapid evolution of criminality in this country. And what I have recognized, it is because of what the two maximum leaders define as the political imperative for their survival. So whatever does not fit into their concept of their political imperative is not real. But the fact of the matter is their political imperative is personal. It has nothing to do with reality on the ground. So if you cannot accept reality on the ground and grab it by the horns and formulate proposals to deal with that reality on the ground, then you are ruling and governing in La La Land. It's not even Babylon, because in Babylon there are no criminals. So what I could tell you this afternoon, Mrs. Tesheira.
Call me Karen, please. I take
Karen?
Yes, Karen, please.
In the close to 25 years of the 21st century that have nearly elapsed, the only government we have had in the 21st century that took the task of approximating reality accurately and acted upon it was the final government of Mr. Patrick Manning. The only one. And Mr. Manning placed the task of walking this intervention on the ground to the most competent technician ever appointed Minister of National Security in this country since 1962. All the rest we have had, other than that gentleman, are simply spin merchants in the image and likeness of the maximum leader. And at present, we have had 3 spin merchants under the present PNM administrations who are simply spin merchants, of little or no technical capacity. So the first question I put to you is, in 2015, why wasn't that apex competent technician in the art of running a national security apparatus, reforming it and pointing it to reality and dealing with the reality, why wasn't he brought back to run the Ministry of National Security in Trinidad and Tobago?
Well, can I sort of give a... Well, he has this. I suppose you're talking about Martin Joseph, right?
Yes.
Okay, so Martin Joseph is deceased, God rest his soul. He drowned a few years ago whilst Mr. Manning was still alive. The thing, what I did know was that he didn't want to take on the Ministry of National Security when I came in 2007. He did not want to. He had it before because it's a very risky job. Because he used to speak out, just as what you're saying. I would sit down in the parliament and hear him talk out very clearly about the root cause of the crime, which was the transshipment of drugs especially at the time, and now it's drugs and guns, from Venezuela through Colombia through both of them, because of our porous borders, because of all the reasons that we already know. And he would identify it and compare our situation to what had happened to the Miami in the 1980s. It looked like a carbon copy. What you saw happening there was what was happening here, but he didn't want it. I think he asked Mr. Manning to relieve him of that portfolio, but Mr. Manning knew that he was the only one he could trust to hold on that portfolio. So he did do that. So I don't think that, given his reluctance, at least up to that point in time, I can't speak in 2015 because I was not around at all and played no part in this administration. But I suspect he had bowed out of it. It was a very hard task to carry out, especially when, let's just say that Mr. Manning did say, it's actually in the newspapers, I read an article before I came on, and I mean, I knew he felt so because he had expressed it to me, when I say personally, when he would come to the ministry and he's looking out through the window, I got a sense of a man who wanted to leave a legacy, who had leadership position now, and he wanted to leave and deal with something that he probably had not dealt with as comprehensively as he should have or would have liked to. And one of the things he did say, in quoted, is that they got rid of me because I was going after the drug trade. And he did tell me that, the real approach is it's not a secret. They have to know it. How I knew it? I was in the cabinet like everybody else. Some of them in their 20, many more years than I ever was. So you don't tell me they don't know what the issues were. He said to me that we have to be like a Chinese wall. That big fish approach really was not going to get us anyway. We see that without calling names of the many persons who have been tried in the airport scandal have yet to serve time while others have served time being out how many years. So we know that the big fish approach was not the answer. The rather is to make it unattractive to take the drugs through Trinidad and Tobago, because those people who are involved in the drug trade are looking for an easy route through which to pass their drugs to North America, Europe, and North America, Europe, and the key one other country was mentioned. And so he understood that. And so what he had started to do was, you had on one hand the Ministry of National Security, which you had because it worked together, FIU was Ministry of Finance. A lot of the supporting gambling commission, which you were cruising down, was Ministry of Finance, because a lot of the money laundering was going through there. He was also looking at the OPVs and all of those equipment and all of these ships and the boats and the radar system that could go all the way down to St. Kitts, which as far as St. Kitts. So he was taking a very, very, what should I call it? He was not taking a pot shot at it or hodgepodge approach to it. He was taking a very coherent approach, closing it in. And he actually said in 2010, the reason that he believes that they went after him was because they recognized that he was serious about getting rid of the drug trade. And he was. He very much was something. But the reality was that for whatever reason, he decided to call the elections, and we have what we have today. But going back to the budget, using that as a kind of a guidepost of what the government has done. Let me just read out some of the things, and I would like to hear your comments. And this is 2025, and also 2024 is very similar in terms of the approach. A lot of it was on dealing with maritime. A lot was dealing with maritime and maritime and coastal issues. So, for instance, in 2025, they talked about an automatic fingerprint ID system, acquiring for the Defense 4 patrol launches, 8 high-speed interceptors, 2, I can't even read my own handwriting, 2 rescue surveillance fixed aircrafts, and upgrade and maintenance of the Demon, which I think that was the UNC, and the 2 hostile vessels, setting up of the forensic center in St. Joseph, and getting 2,000, or I think 2,000 or 3,000 new vehicles, but in the first 5 years, 500. And that is following the 2024, let me just say that, the 5 police stations, I think there were 7 new police stations that have been constructed by now. Again, he mentioned the Forensic and Pathology Services DNA Ballistic Center. He also mentioned a coastal riverine patrol unit attached to the Carnage Police Station, which has been implemented June of this year. Again, he talked about patrol boats. And then he talked about Damien patrol vessels. Then he talked about scanners. Then he talked about handheld scanners. Then he talked about new police vehicles worth 80 million. And then he talked about, again, the Riverine police unit. So I'm just going to look at those two in particular because they really speak to one another in a sense, even on 2023. So what do you
Yeah.
think of all of that? What do you think of all those measures? If we say that the drug trade and the unlicensed guns, which is the main cause of murders, I don't know if you have the statistics, I don't, with regard to the number of murders committed with unlicensed guns and where we have reached with the murder rate, because CSO, I couldn't get up-to-date figures on that. What do you say to all those measures? Aren't those good measures?
Those are measures that are in fact coming out from an instrumentalist approach to so-called crime control. But what is happening? You are not targeting the dynamic that is driving the evolution of the illicit trades in Trinidad and Tobago and the violence on the ground. Because you are now still going into 2025 yet to solve deep, deep mistakes made by the regime of 2010 to 15 when they dismantled the national security apparatus they inherited and never rebuilt anything of comparable impact, and they demitted office. And since then, from 15 to 24, you have been floundering. So what we must understand, you place the reality we must learn from is the rivers of blood from 2017 to 2022. Those rivers of blood that flowed across this land was the direct result of an entirely new transnational organized crime dynamic in Trinidad and Tobago, which nobody has addressed, nobody speaks to, nobody has analyzed, and nobody has mounted an assault on. And a fundamental part of
I have something to answer, respond to what I just read to you, because it was really a rhetorical question, but I'm asking you why not? If all of that is what you're saying, you're making it sound like it's happenstance or bungling or ineptitude. You're making it sound like that, and if it's ineptitude and incompetence, but it's very difficult to believe that it is sheer incompetence and happenstance and ineptitude that you can't get it right. You're not able to address a crime situation which is spiraling out of control since you have come into office, in spite of all these measures. So I have something written here, but I want to hear from you. Why do you seem to be putting it down to incompetence rather than?
Well, the only explanation, rational explanation to come up with is either incompetence, which flows from a political imperative, or your complicity with transnational organized crime. And I had no money into going court, but I guess who?
No, you don't have to. You have a fair comment. And you no. You have a fair comment. The reason why you have to say, how can it be sheer incompetence? Because the reason I asked you that is that in a December 2022 article in one of the major newspapers, they said that the same 2022 you mentioned, actually, December 2022 report, said that 19,002 containers entered Trinidad unchecked, according to the controller of accounts at a joint select committee meeting. She also said that the custom excise, which is the enforcement and arrest branch of the Ministry of Finance, is 40% understaffed, with only 272 experienced members and 82 recently hired out of a complement of they should have a minimum of 700. She also said that this is from the JSA meeting, that the scanners, there were 5 scanners donated by the United States. They're all not working. 4 out of 5 are not working and need to be replaced. The only scanners that were working were in the baggage room. She also said that there are 14 bays for manual checking and only 3 officers assigned to check containers. So we also have from the, so this is not, this is, what you're going to tell me, how is, if you are acknowledging in your budget about maritime, you say that is the cause of the crime. You're telling us that's the cause of the crime. And you're showing that you recognize that by the budgetary allocations you have made, certainly in 2024 and 2025. But in September 2024, there's an article that said, billions spent on crime. And the Vice Marshal, Daniel, again in a Joint Select Committee meeting and question, said the 2 hostile patrol ships that they bought in Australia were not operational. The 2 Damien major patrol vessels were also out of operation. 4 out of the 14 OPVs were functioning. The water border, he said that the borders are largely unguarded and a gateway for smuggling guns. This is what the report said, drugs and other illicit items from neighboring Venezuela. They say they fought for instance, in Tobago in 2017, the one Coast Guard boat, they have a picture of it on its side, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's ever been replaced. So THA offering to let them use fishing boats.
Yeah.
Oh, tell me, please. All I could say is these 80, and they're recruiting more police for what? More boots on the ground. You did it so many times, it didn't work. Who buying the cars? Because under the procurement legislation, understandably, national security is excluded from the oversight of the procurement regulator. So we don't know who they purchased it from. But what we do know is they purchasing a lot of them, a lot of stuff, costing billions of dollars, and then miraculously, they're not functioning, they're not operational, they're all out of commission. And in fact, this gentleman called Mark Williams, 15 years ago, he observed that Trinidad and Tobago was a major transshipment project. So he said this in 15 years ago for illegal drugs to North America and Europe. An indication there's a rogue element in the National Guard in Venezuela escorting the shipment to Trinidad and Tobago. So how could you not, in all sincerity, be making these allocations, budgetary allocations to national security, in which the persons who have to face the Joint Select Committee and then a government permission to speak to tell you, well, everything they give us, it's mashing up and they're not replacing it. And we have 123 points of entry. And the reason why we have a big problem is that drugs and guns are entering the countries and we are being exploded with gangs, with unlicensed guns and murder. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure it out.
What we must understand is that, first lesson, 2 contending business models in transnational organized crime went to war in Trinidad and Tobago from 2017.
Oh.
And the entire national security apparatus was simply bystanders watching on to this battle. They were irrelevant.
Now, how would they be relevant? You're not calling, I don't want to get in trouble, but I'm just asking, how would they become irrelevant?
Because the national security apparatus in Trinidad and Tobago is not configured, outfitted and trained to deal with the most intractable element you can face in your engagement with criminality, because transnational organized crime is richer than Trinidad and Tobago.
True.
more disciplined, ruthless, and you have a national security apparatus that does not focus on it. The next thing we must understand, an entire illicit migrant population of Latin Americans are now in Trinidad and Tobago, moving back and forth between Venezuela like Maxi going San Fernando and coming back.
But did they ask, didn't a police officer say they should let the Venezuelans join in national security? Be part of the national security. I heard that. I'm sure I heard that was from a police officer. These same people that you're saying bringing in the drugs and bringing in the guns and bringing in the human. The other day they got about 13 or 14 of them in some hotel. I mean, nearly every week or 2 weeks.
No, you see.
Why do you want them in the police service?
The fact of the matter is that they, remember, within this illicit Latin American migrant population, it's only Venezuelan, you know. You have an array of different nationalities who are all under the control of the Colombian capo working for them.
You keep saying that.
And they move through Trinidad and Tobago with impunity because they are a culture apart, a language apart, sworn to secrecy, and the entire national security apparatus makes no difference. So what the lesson from 2017 to 22, and this is the primary lesson that is supposed to be addressed at every budget, is not instrumentalities, is not more plaster on the saw, is a deep-seated, ongoing, focused system of reform of the national security apparatus that will refocus and revision the national security apparatus to deal with the real threat on the ground, not this bogus fantasy land threat that you manufacture for political imperatives. That is the reality.
Go back to before 2017, Darius, because you must have a reason why you are focused on 2017. But this idea of the, I know it was there when Mr. Manning was there, because I knew that he was focused on that. I think that was his thing. He wanted to leave that legacy. I really believe that. I may be wrong, but that's what I certainly got from my interactions with him. But in 2014, Brownfield, who was the U.S. Assistant Secretary for International Narcotics and Law Enforcement, via telephone call from Washington on the 26th of May 2014, after the murder of Dina Sital, he's had this to say. This is 2014, so we're not going to pretend we don't know. 2014, he said the assassination of a leading attorney in Trinidad and Tobago was orchestrated by a transnational drug organization putting, what's it like, something, it's not terrible when you don't understand even what I'm writing, drug organization putting pressure of a high level of operating at a high level of organized crime in Trinidad. This was a clearly planned operation and orchestrated by an international criminalization with a presence in Trinidad and Tobago. And there's only one kind of entity that does contract murders of this sort of degree of sensitivity, that is organized crime. Brownfield also points to the link between the increased use of the Caribbean region as a transit point for US-bound drugs and a rise in murder and violence in the region, shifting from Central America in response to increased interdiction efforts in the Isthmus, and the amount of cocaine trafficked through the Caribbean more than tripled over the last 5 years. Also, I read this before, but I'm going to read it because I can't understand if I am reading this out. I am saying it. I have nothing. I'm not in government. I am reading what the United States DA, they are telling us, and they tell us since 2014. he also, in that same UN, United Nations, talked about the connection of crime with the economy. And according to the UN Office on Drug and Crimes, 2.5 times homicide rate of in high income countries as Trinidad. And you have the young people being pulled into a downward spiral of drugs, crime, and corruption. But what I really am saying is, the U.S. Security Council, in their terms of reference, said the transnational organized crime is a growing threat to national and international security. Developing countries with weak rules of law can be particularly susceptible to transnational organization penetration. The apparent nexus in some states among transnational organization elements in government, including intelligence services and high-level business figures, represents a significant threat to economic growth and democratic institutions. In countries with weak governance, there are corrupt officials that turn a blind eye to transnational organization activity. And I am reading from the UN Security Council. This is not me, so you don't say it's me. I'm not saying this. It's they saying that, right? They're saying that insinuate themselves into the political process in a variety of ways, either through direct bribery, setting up shadow economies, influencing financial and security sectors through coercion and corruption, and positioning themselves as alternative providers of security services. So this is what they said. And, all of those elements or all of those are present, it seems to me.
No, they were always present in Trinidad, but why I start at 2017 is that 2017 indicated to the government of Trinidad and Tobago and its national security apparatus that the previous structure of transnational organized crime in Trinidad and Tobago that operated from the 1960s up to then was now gone. So
who gave that indication? The government? No, I'm just, I don't have to call it person, but I mean the government.
No, what I'm telling you is from what I know, my research.
Oh, okay.
Because what happened, the blood wars was between Colombian and Mexican transnational organized crime in Trinidad and Tobago. So what has happened in Trinidad and Tobago is that the entire structure of the illicit change has rapidly evolved to one that today where we have never encountered it before. So that means the precarious position of the national security apparatus today in 2024 is even worse. 2017 was the parting of the Red Sea. So what we have had now.
Why can't the government then? To me, just as how Barbados has, I know we are signatory to impacts. I know we are signatory to impacts, but the impact has a office or headquarters at the garrison in Barbados. And impact seems to be, which is a combination of all these international drug intelligence and enforcement agencies, including the I guess the DA in America, etc., have had tremendous success, it seems to me, when they have gone up the islands, including Jamaica, Bahamas, etc., and have been very successful in not only the transshipment of drugs, getting the being able to capture or to be successful over millions of tons, it seems to me, if I remember. Trigger 1 and Trigger 2, I think they called it. That was the code name. And then on top of that, arresting people. So what I don't understand, if we know all of this, why continue a charade of new police vehicles, new police recruits, and new equipment to have the equipment destroyed and became inoperable? Somebody's getting contracts. I don't know who it is. Somebody getting contracts. And then after they get the contracts, we don't hear anything. But the equipment that you brought in, and tell the country that you brought in, because you know that is a threat to Trinidad. Within 2 tours, those same, with that two hostile ships to the Prime Minister made a personal visit to Australia to see its oversight. They say both of them are down. And I believe I read that one person who was in the Coast Guard has been discharged to come something to do with
No,
the
what we have to understand is that
what's going on then.
is the irrelevance of impacts and all the CARICOM institutions, because in the Caribbean island chain, Trinidad and Tobago, St. Vincent and St. Lucia are impacted by the same change in business models and the war that has ensued. That is not Jamaican reality.
But
That
what
is
is the
not
problem
Antigua
when we're talking about
reality.
from a government? Because this is I try to tie it to the national security budget, which is really supposed to be a representation of the strategic
Yes,
vision
but
of the government.
what
So
I am speaking to
what is the reason for the failure then?
is the inadequacies at the institutional level from the state institutions and the university. So taxpayers' money spending on these institutions and this university, and what they are putting out is not addressing the reality because of various reasons. Look at the murder rate of St. Vincent. The same war is going on there. Look at the fact now that in St. Lucia you are interdicting
6 and
people with
7.
AR-15s.
And not only that, they say that I mean, I don't know much about gangs, but the 6s and 7s apparently come from Trinidad, and some crime that was committed from some jewelry store owned, a pop-up jewelry store owned by Trinidadians. And they said who carried out reportedly were the 6s and 7 gangs who originated from Trinidad. Same thing in Tobago. It said the murder rate is past 25, but they are saying that most of these murders are being committed by gangs who are recruiting in Tobago. Tobago never
No,
had
the
so,
Tobago's reality is much more complex than that. Much more complex. And Tobago is now changed forever. There is no coming back.
oh my God, don't say that. You can't say that.
But that, you want me, I could detail Tobago reality now and tell you why they're coming back.
Anyway, we have two people. Keith Ramdial is glad that we are addressing it. And he's saying, which is the white collar crime. I want to deal with that separately. Because people seem to think that white collar crime is not crime. And I want to deal with that separately because that is violent crime. But I want to deal with it. And that is in the budget because some of the budgetary allocations and legislation mentioned in the budget is intended to deal with white collar crime. So I want to deal with that separately. But I was still on this with the scanners. So you didn't know the scanners weren't working? You didn't know that that the police did not always have what you call it, the vest to protect them. I mean it's just and also the DNA testing. You know that in the DNA testing, I mean that is a number one crime fighting tool. My God, you don't need to be. Why aren't they utilizing
what
it?
we have to come to understand, Karen, and accept is that you could put all of those things in place. They are inadequate to stop the assault of transnational crime on us. You could put all of that in place, but if you're not reforming in-depth, ongoing revisioning and reform of our national security apparatus to embrace and lock horns with that national, transnational organized crime threat, we spend it up in mud. So everybody who feel that the problem will be solved with instrumentalities, it will not be. It will only be solved with reality and vision.
But you know,
we have to get real.
Darius, the point I was trying to make, I hope that it came across, is that buying all this new equipment. Well, the helicopters all gone. The is it the air guard? We had an air guard, and I think that is gone by the wayside. But all these major patrol vessels and OPVs, which they have bought, when the Vice Marshal Daniel went to GSC and they gave a report just recently, what you realize that all these things are inoperable, they're out of commission, they're not repaired, they're not working, and then you're going to buy some more. And when you buy some more, it's for the same thing to happen. So it's just like, I mean, what's the point? What's the point?
No, but That debate will not solve our problem. That debate
What will solve the
can
problem then?
carry to the problem.
Yeah, if you, I just want to mention one other thing before I ask you, please, to give me what you think would help to solve the problem. One other thing I wanted to mention, I started mentioning it, and this is just a continuation of purchasing scanners, putting instead of tripling the amount of recruits from 300 to 1,000, buying 80 million new worth of cars, when police vehicles, when there's how many police vehicle cemeteries all over the country, right? Is the DNA and ballistic units testing. I mean, the backlog was 32,000, 40 something thousand, and then they tell you since last year or year before, and it came in this year's budget, I believe, or that they now said exactly where the government of the Republic of China are going to be building up a brand new DNA testing and ballistic testing facility in St. Joseph. What are you doing to deal with? I think China is a small country.
Yeah, but you see,
capacity right now to
you see,
hire something
it is very hard to talk about this topic if the persons you are speaking to don't know nothing about the game.
I mean, they don't know anything. So so they don't know that they are ballistics, the need testing.
That is not the game.
Oh.
Learn from what has happened to the United States of America.
What has happened?
All the instrumentalities that you stand up every day and talk about that you're going to get, that is where you learn it from, massa. But what they don't tell you is that when you speak to the transnational organized crime operatives, they teach you that they buy and they boast how they buy the best instruments and hand it to their staff. But we own the staff. We own the staff in the Border Patrol. We own the staff in Customs. We own the staff in the DEA. So do you all feel that transnational organized crime does not have a strategic planning process to counter measure every instrument you put in the hands of humans, knowing fully well that you buy and purchase a human? The port of Rotterdam and Antwerp, they have all of that. But the traffickers teach you in the port of Rotterdam and Antwerp, we own the customs. And the customs officers walk out our drugs for us because the money we pay them for doing that is their retirement fund. So you see, the focus on instrumentality is what we get from massa. That is a mirage. Because we continue to feel that transnational organized crime and organized crime in Trinidad and Tobago, everybody loves to call gang. That's organized crime. We'll never describe them as organized crime. But the Jamaicans do.
They are not the organized crime.
They will never want to admit that they are brighter than those in the national security apparatus. And that is why they make the billions to bribe members of the national security apparatus around the world. So if we are totally unwilling to come to that reality and wrestle with it, we just spinning top in mud. The instrumentalities mean nothing. Evidence disappears.
Stations that they have set up, the new police stations, seven new police stations that they have constructed. I think, or some of them are already constructed, some under the process of being constructed. The recruiting of 1,000 recruits instead of 300 in the police service. The new modern scanners, which they are in the process of procuring, 2 out of 5 of them. The 1600 scanners, I don't know where that has reached. You are saying all of that is spinning, stopping mud. That's what you say.
As you bring the scanners, they will be sabotaged, as what happened with all the highfalutin scanners that the Americans gave to the Trinidad government and put it in the airport. The Piarco Airport and the Crown Point Airport are sepulchres of trafficking.
God have mercy.
The people who watching this scanner, you own them. They don't see nothing. And they own from the officer in command, go straight to the top.
We talk in general, yeah. We're not talking about the points in that.
I'm not calling on him.
Yes, and also too, I mean, it only stands to reason that the sun continue to perpetuate itself unless there's some collusion by others, because they are turning a blind eye. It has to be, because I think it has reached a point where it's so entrenched now in the system, it is almost impossible to root out. And on that point, let me just mention this. I want to hear what you would say on this. And I was really taken aback, because going through all the reviews, somebody's asking, I hope he doesn't mind me calling in. I just want to acknowledge people. Ryan Simonga says, my thing is, how do you prevent young people from being captured by crime in the first place? Well, I'll get you to answer that just now. But one of the things that disturbed me is in one of the budget statements, the minister spoke about setting up. I want to find exactly where I wrote it down. I want to get exactly where I wrote it down. Where he said that in Kumoto, they were setting up a training center for ballistic training, for also training the I'm trying to get the exact wording that they used. But what I mean is that the SSA, which is Mr. Best, and I'm not going to talk to him about it because I know there's something bigger than both of us right here. But I, in reading about it, in the budget debate, in the budget statement, they were talking about how they were going to, one of the measures they were putting in place to deal with the crime, and they actually mentioned the Kumoto, and they actually mentioned that it would be an operations center for SSA. So when you heard the Prime Minister come out and say that they had a huge amount of ammunition collected there, a huge cache of guns collected there in the Kumoto SSA base. When you heard that, I said to myself, but yes, something is terribly wrong. That why does this SSA have so many guns, so much ammunition, and high-powered guns and specialized guns, only to read that was exactly what was intended to happen, that the Kumoto was going to be the place where the training center for, look at it, the training center, modernization of, that is the wrong part. But anyway, it was going to be the training center for the police recruits in shooting, use of firearms, use of ballistics. That's why the ballistics were being sent there. That's why the firearms were being sent there. That's why you had a build-up. But when you heard the Prime Minister give a statement, you swore, I got the impression, I said, but my Lord, what are they doing out there at SSA? And then you read that the Vice Marshal, Daniel, had to save, according to the newspapers, had to save Major Roger Best, who was in charge of the SSA, from being charged with possession of a prohibited weapon, because he had recruited him as a reservist, and therefore he was entitled to have in his possession a gun. And so when you read all of this, it is very, 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 very troubling, I have to say. So I want to ask now, what is the answer then? Because it looks as if there
is a major reality still unsaid.
Which is?
You say that you're very troubled, but I ain't tell you what is going on in the game in Trinidad since 2017. When you hear that, you're supposed to be much more troubled. Much more troubled.
I am very, very troubled, actually. That's why I
can't tell you what is going on the ground and what has emerged since 2017. You're supposed to have a plane ticket.
Listen, Go ahead. And of course, we know we're saying things that we are able to um, use, have reference points for that information that we are referring to, because that's what I do.
You know what? This is my ongoing research since Ohi.
Okay.
So whereas before you had one dominant transnational organized group, you had gangland under the control of that group. So you had, and then you had within gangland those who are not linked and therefore perpetually I do call them the unattached. So that was the structure of gangland. Since 2017, you have two transnational organized groups in operation, two ganglands affiliated to each of them, one. You have one group of gangland that has attached itself to serve the illicit Latin American migrant community, which is also under the rule of the Capo. And then you have a huge group of displaced former members of the game looking for living. So they are looking now, and they're looking to make war on those affiliated to the two transnational organized crime models. And they're looking now to make war, a new kind of war on us, because they're now looking for living. They are unemployed, and they're pioneering all forms of enterprise that they never involved in before, like home invasion.
Yeah.
Right?
I see this kidnapping a young man in today's papers.
And well, I'll tell you what's going on with that too. And remember, in this new structure in Trinidad, the two transnational models continue to be at war with each other. So that is the complexity of the reality that you're dealing with, because you have people out there circulating armed who are not affiliated to a transnational organized group looking for living, and they have to come at us.
Let me read where I got it. It was the 2020 budget. They said a state-of-the-art training police academy in Kumotu for ballistics, firearms training, as well as crime scene investigation and gang-related investigations. So that's where, so you know what I mean? When you heard this thing, I just had to get back the source of where I read it, and it was the 2020 budget. So to come now and give the impression that there's a pileup of arms, a pileup of things, but they're sending it there. So coming back to your point now, it seems to me, this is what you're hearing too, that now you have breakaway gangs who are gangs unto themselves.
They are the ones who got displaced. They can't make it to be affiliated to the Mexicans because they don't have what it takes.
Right.
And the Colombians cut them loose because the two largest federations on the ground.
Talking about in the Caribbean.
I talk about in Trinidad. The two largest federations on the ground in Trinidad and Tobago, who were under the rule of the Colombian Capo, were totally wiped out in the wars from 17 to 22. So you know what has started, what has pushed and started the spate of kidnapping in Central? Man collecting debt.
Yeah, but
they're collecting debt.
Allegedly. So you better say allegedly, yeah?
Allegedly.
Yeah, please say allegedly. Because unless, you can't be, people have their own intelligence and they can add one and one, and hopefully they wouldn't get three. But one has to assume that these ransoms and kidnapping and all this thing that you're hearing about, there's more to it than meets the eye. And I think people have become so jaundiced, so cynical in this country that even when it is not the case, and they are going to think it is connected. Nearly every crime, I think, in this country, except for domestic crimes, and even then, let me just say this, even the domestic crimes that you hear about, in many instances, the perpetrator is on cocaine or some very hard drug, and in that state commits the crime. So even where the crime is not directly related to transnational and gang related activity, it still is, it has taken over our country. It has taken over our country in every single area of activity, that we have become prisoners in our own country before a hapless government that I believe is insincerely, I don't, whether or not at some point in time they turn a blind eye, I cannot say. I cannot see. But there's so much to make you feel that all of this happening and you don't know and you couldn't deal with it. And talking, about all kinds of things other than what is obviously the major cause of crime, focusing on spotlighting the young, as I told, let me just say this because I think it's important, and also to answer Ryan C. Mungle. Can't these people be, can't you prevent people from being captured by crime? This is what I had to tell someone. And I am not saying I am right. I'm not saying I'm right, but I think there's value to what I'm saying. A lot of the recruitment happens in urban poor areas. And because of the migration of some of that urban poor, it's along the East West corridor where you find it, but now it has filtered into other areas where now we're doing down center in certain areas, in urban areas. And these young people are easily recruitable because when you say the unemployment rate is low, it is, these people are working for CPEP and they may not get 5 days of work, they may get 3 days. Whatever they're working for is not a living wage. How are you going to be able to rescue these young people from a life of crime? Let us be realistic. It is not right. But how can you rescue them from a life of crime when in many instances what they are being offered as salary are not encouraged to enter into enterprises? They're not encouraged, as far as I'm concerned, really meaningfully to become entrepreneurs in their own right. That is the province of a handful of persons who must control everything in this country. And so these young people who live in urban communities are much more easily recruitable than if you're living in rural communities. And what happens with them, when you're telling them that they could take deliver a drug thing for $5,000, that is more than they could for in a matter of 2 hours. How that could ever compete? How could that ever CPEP could ever compete with that? So you don't mind them being uneducated, in my view. You do not mind them being uneducated. You don't mind them working for CPEP because that could be your voting block for any party, whoever is in power. That's a voting block, right? But they're also the recruiting fodder for these agencies to be the ones you see on the streets committing a crime with guns that they could not possibly afford to own. $15,000. That's what they had a report. I'm not saying that the Guardian had by one of the newspapers, the Guardian, had a report on the price of one of those guns for hire. These young men are the ones doing the shooting. Those are the ones captured on TikTok. And as I said to somebody who told me he was held up 4 times. And in every case, only on nearly everyone, it was a young Afro-Trinidadian. As I told him, the demographics of Trinidad and Tobago, and in any country, if you have urban poverty, it is the recruiting ground for gang-related crimes. You do not have how it's spreading, but you don't hear about it in Point Fortin yet. Now you're hearing about it in Maruga. Now it's gone to Tobago now, but then it's Trinidadians going over there and committing crime. It's this. So to answer the young man, how do you stop them from being attracted? You cannot stop them from being attracted because guess what? They're living in the city areas. So guess what? When they walk out of their house, they're seeing people driving Mercedes Benz, all kind of top of the line thing, drinking, going out and spending money, car done, living a lifestyle that they know because of their association where a lot of their money is coming from. So they don't feel, they have the same ruthlessness and lack of empathy that their bosses have. So don't expect them to act differently. Yes, some will not, but don't expect them to act differently when the opportunities for real entrepreneurial opportunities are not really given to them, and you want them to stay right there at the bottom of the barrel so that you can exploit them and put the highlight and the spotlight on them. And it is not right. This is what I feel passionate about. This is what I feel passionate about. And I don't know what the answer is to the young man, Mr. Simangal. You can't, you see, education, even if nowadays, what you're doing with a BA in history and geography, going and teach, how many people could go in the teaching and who want to teach? Political science, what are you doing with that degree? They can't even, starting salaries with the cost of living and inflation, cost of food, cost of transportation. When you add up all that, that salary will not take you to the end of the month. So it is very easy to be seduced. It is very easy. I am not saying this is right. I think it is wrong. But put the blame where it should be and start cleaning it up at that end. You may not save everybody, but at this rate, we are going to, it's a lost generation. And I'm sorry, Darius, but I think you might be right. I mean, I am really concerned for the future of Trinidad and Tobago. So tell us, what now you know what the issue is and the gangs and how it operates. What do we do? What can we do?
Yeah. What we must now understand is that there is no more urban recruitment and not that much spreading from urban to rural.
Mm-hmm.
The market model demands that the areas that were not targeted in the first phase of expansion of the illicit trades through the East-West corridor, it now goes south of the Caroni.
That's right.
Right? That south of the Caroni is now the area that is being flooded. Mm-hmm. And they move into the marginalized spaces of that geographical expanse. They move from the landing zones outwards. They establish their bases, and now in the space of Central, it is endemic. What we must understand is that not everybody makes money in the game. And there are young men and women involved in the game, the majority of them, especially under the Colombian model, who remain hand-to-mouth.
Why is that now?
Because that is the way the model works. The Colombian model is viciously inequitable and endemically violent and indisciplined. So they are in the game, they are armed, but they're perpetually on the scrunt. And there is this culture of survival of the fittest. There is a wolf pack culture where the strongest must dominate and exploit the weak. So they're in the game at the lowest level, and they're showing no benefits of it. But they're armed. And with that arm that they tote, they exercise impunity. So what has evolved, because it has been here since the 1960s, is a culture by which they socialize you by and impart the values to you. And it passes from generation to generation. It is based on creating crime families. So what if it has been here since the 1960s and we have done nothing to arrest it? We have now reached collapse. Collapse. And that is why all the politicians could talk about is a menu of instrumentalities. Because culturally, value system-wise, the willingness to act, we are in collapse. We have literally surrendered to transnational organized crime. Now we have two models in operation. One is the most efficient and disciplined in the history of the illicit game in the Western Hemisphere for the generation and accumulation of wealth. And they are now calling the shots in Trinidad and Tobago, and they have changed the game. We can't even deal with the indisciplined Colombian model. How can you deal with that disciplined, highly efficient Mexican model? So everybody now have to look for excuses.
What is their modus operandi? Is there to bring to what is it, to use it as a transshipment point only? Because you see so many young people on the streets, and I suppose people not on the streets who are hooked on these stronger drugs.
No, the Mexican model insists that when you are an affiliate, you are in a transition zone, you have to fully develop the illicit market of your local transition zone to generate and maximize the accumulation of wealth from the opportunities that you are given in that local zone. So when they are operating, you see sophistication in the methodology, like breaking open safety deposit box and bank branch over a weekend and things like that. That is the level they operate at. You see the inflow and rapid spread of synthetic drugs. So their model generates wealth and they accumulate wealth faster than any other model. And they have an entire menu of illicit activities that they unleash with their disciplined personnel to generate and maximize that wealth, which they pass back to their warm bodies on the ground, a significant proportion of that wealth compared to the Colombians. So they turn their operations on the ground in Trinidad and Tobago into drug traffickers in their own right, not beasts of burden. So that is the intractable enemy we are now faced with in the Caribbean. And in Trinidad and Tobago, they have made their mark. They have sent the message. And all who break stick in the airs, that is it.
You have, I don't know what to say. You have expressed this in a way that is so profoundly depressing. And
I have studied them for years. I have written books on them.
But what is the point then? So then we just put our hands up in the air and let them. Well, from what you say, it's already happened.
Yes. So if I explain to you what is going on in Tobago, you will see the power of the model.
Because fishing boats to patrol.
Because they have created Tobago into a trafficking point in its own right. Tobago is no longer dependent upon Trinidad for supply of nothing illicit. Supply comes from Tobago to Trinidad now.
Allegedly, because allegedly.
You may call anybody's name?
No, you're not calling anybody's name, but that is your point of view. But I want to turn because we're running out of time, and I wanted to still deal with something that a lot of times people, make a big distinction between white collar crime and crime, as they call it. And yes, if you look at a first pass as a definition of white collar crime, it is referred as non-violent. That is what they would say to you, and they give you examples of that, of fraud, money laundering. I wrote it down when I looked it up. Money laundering is one of them, embezzlement, and but they are crimes because they all carry terms of imprisonment, serious terms of imprisonment. Most of them, they are creatures of statute and they're punishable. But an article, um, just coincidentally. I mean, I never believe that white collar crime is not violent, not associated with violent crime. It is part and parcel of the violent crime. And having said that, I saw an article again in one of the newspapers saying that white collar crime is violent crime. It is not victimless, because when you're part of for example, they use wire fraud or money laundering, they are part of a criminal organization who directly supports and encourages the violence that you see at the street level. So I think it is a fallacy for us to continue to make that distinction. And why I mention it now and ask you to comment now is that a lot of the measures in the budget, for example, the procurement legislation, the refinery. I mean, there are concerns about why is the sale refinery not being handled under the review of the procurement regulator, because the legislation was amended in 5 of 2016 to allow for the sale of assets, and that came under the review and purview of the regulator. But the regulations in support of that will have not been passed, and this is since 2016. Yet when they wanted to get the $1 million, because it spent $1 million and had not gone to the procurement regulator to get the permission for some function, the minister immediately, with a snap of the fingers, passed the regulation so that the legislation would take effect. So you wonder then, when you look at there's so many issues regarding the sale of the refinery and the role of the procurement regulator, who herself has said that she has no legal authority. They may have consulted her, but she doesn't have the power to review who was selected, questions that were asked, waiting to be made to these questions. It is troubling, especially when one of those bidders is a local consortium whose names we do not know. And I want to know the names. And then we look at the TTRA. That was supposed to, I passed it when I was in government, and then Mr. Manning called election. But that was supposed to be a main weapon in the fight against drugs and money laundering and the transshipment of crime, because we had the help of the customs, because customs fell under Ministry of Finance, and we had the help of the U.S. Customs in terms of that, because they have powers of arrest and detention. Now that is going to be delayed again, because it came up in the Privy Council hearing on another issue, that the issue of enforcement has not been addressed. Then we look at unexplained wealth of 2019, which is supposed to be operationalized. That has not been operationalized. Then we look at the campaign financing legislation, which was modeled on Jamaican model, a very good model. They have not set up, it's gone to the Joint Select Committee since 2020, 4 years ago. And we look at all of these, the Gambling Commission, yet to be operationalized. I don't think it should be operationalized at all, because as we know, the procurement regulator said is about $5.8 billion worth of complaints made to the regulator's office, and it deals with bid rigging, bribery, and money laundering. And the FIU also made a $5 billion, they said, of unsuspicious transactions, among them money laundering. And one knows that in the money laundering world, casinos and those gambling, they are a main vehicle to launder money. Yet we have those pieces of legislation date back to even when I was in office with the Gambling Commission. That was supposed to be shut down. Now, is that it will be operationalized? You know, I mean, the TTRA, when is it ever going to come into about the unexplained wealth legislation, the campaign financing legislation? All of these are pieces of legislation that carry criminal sentences, that carry punitive sentences. They are crimes, and they are connected to the crime you see on the streets. And yet the government, for the last 9 years, every year they bring it up and do nothing, among other measures. But those, I have selected them because I believe they are in some way connected with the issue of national security in this country, and inability of the government, apparent inability of the government, to get a handle on the runaway crime, homicide, unlicensed guns. I mean, the extortion. It is just it is just alarming. So all of this just does not give you confidence and faith that the government is serious in tackling crime when they have the power in the parliament to pass those pieces of legislation, have them proclaimed, meaning operationalized, and yet 9, 10 years later, we hearing about it in a budget again. So I don't know what your views are on the white collar crime, because we talked about the transshipment, but what are your views on the white collar crime being as violent, if not more violent, and in fact involving more money? That's what the article said, involving more money than the traditional crime that we associate with the word crime. What is
Well,
your
I don't even use the concept white collar crime because
right?
that's a 1950s sociological concept from Massa, which was never valid to begin with, and worse yet in 2024. You see, there's a fundamental question to ask. When you are a decent and respectable bandit, ripping off people, and you are faced with a threat to your enterprise, who do you call to neutralize that threat? Ghostbusters? There is never in the history of the game a decent and respectable enterprise ripping off people who does not have connection to transnational organized crime to do the heavy lifting for them. Because in the course of your enterprise, you will need to eliminate threats to your enterprise. And you're not willing to do it yourself because you have too much to lose.
Reputation.
So you always have your gangland militia at your beck and call to do the heavy lifting for you. That is the reality of the game. And transnational organized crime knows that. And that is why they are always there with them in the shadows. They are always there with them in the shadows.
Are they other than the shadows, or are they part of it? It's integrated.
No, when they're in the shadows, but they are pulling the strings from in the back. Because the word goes around in the game what business you're in, and you have predators out there will move in on you. You must have muscle to protect you.
And you talk about extortion, or extortion seems to be the new game in town, extortion, and extorting people for protection, which is something you hear about in the United States.
Yeah, but you see, that is what we talk about in Trinidad is low-level extortion. You have high-level extortion. And your enforcers in a
allegedly in Trinidad.
No, I don't use allegedly when I talk about what I know to be real, because I touch it and taste it and smell it, and it's a duck. And I do, after it walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, and tastes like a curry duck, I do say it's pheasant. So the reality is they are hardcore criminals of the most violent and rapacious kind, but with a veneer of being upstanding, decent, and respectable people.
I will say this, and I'll let you get back to on it, just because I don't want to forget that thought. When I was doing the research, they said that the person that you associate with violent crime and those so-called white collar crime in Virginia, they have the same personality traits. They are ruthless, they are lacking in empathy, and they all have the same traits. So what you just saying there is not just what you are saying in your books or your text or that. I'm talking about going online and reading the articles, and they're telling you that you will find those same qualities: a lack of conscience, a lack of empathy, a no remorse, exactly the same qualities that one has to have if one is involved in the crime that people, the traditional crime that people associate with guns and so on. And it is just the same thing, exactly what you have just said. Good afternoon, Mr. Prasad. Yes, go ahead.
But you see, they are even more dangerous because being worshipped in the society as to being outstanding, decent, and respectable people, they have impunity. They have impunity. So they wield an impunity that transnational organized crime has to purchase. They wield an impunity of the brotherhood. And that is why they are so effective at what they do. That is why transnational organized crime always involves them. And transnational organized crime can never be effectively efficient without their services. Who do you think in the world financial center systems of the world launders their money for them? That is the reality.
Again, Jay, what's his name with the Ponzi scheme? Was so highly respected.
Yes.
What's his name? You know what I'm talking about. You know,
That is the reality.
had so much trust, and a lot of it had to do with trusting him, and he was always made off.
Bernie.
Bernie Madoff. His son killed himself. My Lord, his whole family destroyed. The whole family destroyed.
So what happens to them is that since they are so enmeshed with transnational organized crime, and they are so vital to them, transnational organized crime always works at building a portfolio on them by which to control them. And one way to control them is with all the evidence you collect on them for their sexual preferences.
Also, don't you think they get paid? I mean, they get them complicit. Once you take something from them, I won't use, and I don't know if what I'm saying is necessarily indicative of that, but I do know when I was Minister of Finance, I did get 1 or 2 calls, and the offers that were made were very, very innocuous. It wasn't anything that you should were too concerned about. But I smelled the rat, I thought, anyhow, and I turned it down. And as soon as I turned it down, I went and told Mr. Manning, because I said, they're not going to be telling Mr. Manning, give their version of the story before I get a chance to tell him. And I thought they were fishing to see if I would take a little something, trying to assess me, and see if I would be on the take. I really thought so. Because in one case, I'm not calling any names, but there was at least 3 different individuals. I could tell you that for sure. And they are well known. I could tell you that for sure. I said to myself, you know what? They are trying to see if I will take that little something, and then they will come in something, it wasn't anything big, come to something a little bigger. By the time you're ensnared and you can't get out, because now they have enough on you, because they are ruthless, lacking remorse, and they do not care. Brian Simonga saying, Madoff, Rudy Madoff, yes, Madoff, you got the right name. I think a lot of people are afraid to participate, really. I'm concerned for you. I really am concerned for you. And because a lot of people don't want to believe what you're seeing. That's the truth. They don't want to believe what you're seeing. I am telling you that. They may know it is true, but they don't want to believe what they are seeing. And I think part of the reason, and I'll give it back to you, is because I think they make sure that the people who they ensnare in their trap are people who have a high level of respectability or power or position, that people will say, nah, man, he or she would never be involved in something. But I have experience from being in the Ministry of Finance, and some of the some things that I learned, yes, I don't put anything beyond anyone. That's all I say.
I don't need anybody to believe me, Karen.
I want them to
I have made my journey. I am pushing 70, looking forward, and with the expectation that my time on this earth is coming to an end. Yeah. So let them feel free.
Yeah.
Let them feel free.
Feel
You
free
want
for
to you want to do what you want to do. I
you do.
hope you can handle what comes down after the event.
But what do you think
Because
will happen? Where you think this will go? Because I think Trinidad has become the society of white envelopes. I really think so. It has so I feel it has reached a point. This is what you were saying. It's become so entrenched in the system that it has become like almost second nature for many of persons who I don't think otherwise would have feel that there's nothing wrong with you want something done, you need my signature, you need to move my thing to go one more step. Let's leave it bureaucratic because the more bureaucracy is the more white envelopes could pass. That's I sometimes think that. I mean, I have become so jaded. I don't know what the
yeah, but you
answer
see,
is. Huh?
what they will never want to accept is that when you dance with transnational organized crime, they have the goods on you.
Yeah.
And the moment reaches in your life when they come to foreclose on their mortgage,
Yeah. That's what I think.
that is what happens to them
That's
when
what
they
I
come to foreclose on their mortgage. But that is their business.
They say once
So,
you get in, you can't get out.
no, you can only leave the game foot first,
Yeah, that's what they
carried by six. That
carried
is
by
the reality.
what do you mean carried by six? You're talking real jargon, gangster
No,
talking.
when you see, I just only talk gangster.
What does that mean though? You're talking to
In
the
the game, when they say carried by six pallbearers.
Oh God, I never heard that before. Lord have mercy. God.
Yeah.
No,
So,
I believe that. I mean,
and
I have seen enough. I think I know someone. I don't know a lot, and so please nobody come after me. But I know enough to know that it's not what you're saying is not untrue. I know
so
enough to know it's not untrue, and I
the,
want to say
the
in
lesson of Epstein is epic.
Manning. Patrick Manning was not. I knew Patrick Manning. I knew from 2007 to 2000, and when he passed away, was not of that ilk, and that is why they could get nothing on him. That's what I truly believe. Now I know it must have been difficult. Now that I understand politics better, and I understand what it must be like to sit in a cabinet, I understand not everybody is. You understand better how things are. He must have had a difficult time, and he must have had a very hard time, very challenging time. But I know from my own interaction with him, he was one person that I believe did not make money his god. And he believed that I believe he believed that he had a calling to for his country. Maybe others may not have felt that way about it, and so they used that to make him come across as appearing arrogant, which was already an unfair thing. But if they want to destroy you, they want to destroy you. Once they make up their mind to destroy you, they're going to destroy you. Eh? The plan is mightier than the sword, so they could destroy you. They found out one thing about you. You did 100 good things. Remember Julius Caesar with Shakespeare? I'm not coming,
Mhm.
right? Yeah, no, and if you believe in Jesus Christ, one day he come in there with the Palm Sunday, next thing they crucifying him. So, there are lessons in life. You go back to the Bible if you believe in the Bible, if you don't, whatever your belief systems are or not. The reality is that, when you not playing the game, when you're not playing the game and they feel you're a threat, which is why I do never want to be a threat to anybody, but I do need to speak out because just like you, Darius, I have a sense of responsibility in my country. I get nothing out of doing this. My family wishes I wouldn't say anything, but I find it hard not to speak out. I just find it hard just to stay silent because I love Trinidad and Tobago, and I just can't be one of those who just turns a blind eye, puts my head in the sand like you. That's why I respect you so much. So let you have all the last of the session this afternoon.
No, you
And
see,
mm,
I started this journey in 1997.
okay, I'm gonna move over because my phone,
Yeah,
my is about to die, as it normally is about to die.
Mr. Darius, can I ask you a question?
of course.
Seeing that these heads are so entrenched in the kind of activities that have us in this kind of mess here now, how can we weed it out, and who are the people who will enforce the weeding out so that we can alleviate ourselves from this kind of it's like a pandemic.
Well, my position is after years on this journey of mine, there are still people in Trinidad and Tobago, people within the national security apparatus, who simply don't accept the reality and they want change. They want to turn this place around. But they continue to be shunted aside. So therefore, the solution has to come from a political will to save this place. And it has to come from walking away from this mindless race babble and coming together as one people to save this place by action, joint action. Because there are people in the system with the capacity, the talent, the commitment to make a difference. What they want is the political leadership that will start the process and they run with it. But what I have discovered over the years, the best and brightest does not rise to the top. From the time you are of the best and the brightest and you pose a threat, you are simply shunted aside. So what is happening? That is why I keep calling for this deep-seated, ongoing process of reform to regenerate the institutional basis of this place. We need dire constitutional reform. We need to bring the Constitution into the 21st century. We need to bring our institutions into the 21st century. And we need to address this collapse of social control. Social control has collapsed. So you have problems, domestic problems, and your solution is to barbarously chop the woman, the child to death. That is when social control has collapsed. So we have now gone to profanity. That is what we have embraced. And that signals collapse. And if we do not rally as a people and a nation in a concerted joint action to correct this thing, well, that is it. That is it. It's done. It's finished. It will only get worse. And that is my position from the old man. Because I'm an old man. For years I've been looking for young people willing to take up the mantle and pass my body of knowledge to them. But everybody afraid. Because they just look at me and just have to watch the price I pay and they say, So that is the reality. Because a system that is rooted in collapse propagates itself. It propagates itself. And it is only the people can break the cycle. So it's time to end the hand wringing and to formulate action. That is my position. And that is my message.
There's so many things that can be done. And I never talk, I keep away from, I would just say that I do think there's an alternative of persons who have that commitment and desire to truly see what you're talking about. I certainly feel passionately about it. And I do think that there is that leadership available in the country. You need a lot of younger people in it, but the older heads are good for giving guidance, because having been inside there, you really need somebody who has some experience, understand the agenda or agenda of people, and you really need some. It's not just a question of technical capacity or passion. It's more than that. You have to understand um, the what they call when they talk about office politics. Well, you have to understand politics. So you need that. But I do think we have people like that. But what I do think is that people are afraid. They are afraid to come out because there are so few opportunities for people to get contracts. There are people who are seduced by power. They love the power. They love being on a board. They love a chairmanship. They love the money they're making. They love the status, and they get seduced by it, and they cannot let it go. They cannot let it go. And because the alternative to letting it go is to go into the wilderness. Because when they let you go, and if your life and who you are is tied up with that, tied up to that money and power and position, and that is who you are. If that is who you are, then when they let you go, you are confined to the dustbin. Right? And unless you have a good sense of self and a good sense of who you are, and that they didn't make you, and you don't need them to make you, unless you don't have that in you, and they know who, unless you are that type of person, and there are few people who are willing to do that. I know so many people who I know they know it is wrong. I know they know I know they know what is going on is wrong. But does that stop them from taking board appointments? Does that stop them from taking? I am going to get too specific. Does that stop them from taking certain positions? Absolutely zero. No. How many of them abandoned Mr. Manning? And let me not go into that. How many of them abandoned him when he could no longer help them, when he was no longer in a position of power to help them? How many of them? Listen, what you're talking about is a hard thing. What you're really looking at is a strong leadership that is able to attract people with ability, competence, and honesty, and trust in that you can do it, you will do it, and you will put the people in front. Now I will just say this thing. I not preach to anybody about religion, because I respect everybody religion, and that is for 100% sure. And those who don't have a religion, it is because I didn't die and come back, so I have no answer to tell anybody mine is right and yours is wrong. I have absolutely no position to do that. But I could say that what as a guide for me, and which is what, if you have any religious belief at all, or even if you're not and you're a humanist, which you're entitled to, what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and suffer the loss of his own soul? I can never understand that. I could never understand people who do that to themselves and know that one day all the riches they have acquired and accumulated staying right here on the earth. And when they are gone, it's only them and them alone to answer for what they did. I cannot understand it. What is the big attraction of that? I mean, it just troubles me so much, And what you're saying really is there's a need for strong leadership, and the country's crying out for it. The country's crying out for it. And I let you have the last few words. We have about 2 more minutes left, and I thank you for coming on. I love of country like myself. We do have a love of our country.
What
I,
as a people, we need to understand that the solution lies in political leadership. It
does.
is the structure of our system that the political system has to lead and guide and govern the country's governance is the problem. And it is the people who determines who run the country. So the final responsibility belongs to us. So when the day is called next year, make sure you know what you're doing, because that action impacts you, your children, your grandchildren, your great grandchildren, and your great great grandchildren.
It's true, because based on our discussion today, since you say the situation is so endemic and so ingrained in our society, and it moved from one geographical area to all over, to all communities. It is so entrenched. You almost painted a picture of hopelessness. And the only way to rescue us is that we do need, because good political leadership, you will see a change.
Yes.
You will see a change. And
That
people have to have that confidence, because we cannot continue like this.
that is the solution that the Constitution tells us is. Other than that, anarchy.
On any good parting word, positive words as we leave the show this
Yes, please.
afternoon?
Please.
Because I think we're all a little depressed.
It's
Say
mind
some
boggling.
positive words before we leave the show.
Remember, we we still love TNT. Love it to the bone. That is why I'm still here.
Yeah.
I made my choice not to go because I love, because I born here. I will stay here. I will fight here. I am going. I made a choice. I'm not going to be no migrant in somebody else's country begging for a passport.
Very good.
Love your country.
Love your
Move
country.
now to save your country. Nobody can do it for us. We have to do it ourselves.
Yes, Mr. Figueroa. And so we have to end the show on that positive note, in the sense of love of country, and that should really be our guidepost in whatever we do. And don't take the easy way out, because the easy way out ends up to being the hard choice. You find it catches up with you. You pay a price. Look, we paying it all now, aren't
Yeah.
we? We are paying it
Yeah.
all. Okay, the crime that we thought was in little communities is spread all over. We all victims of it. So let us love our country. Let us do what is good for our country. And I think, Mr. Vergara, thank you so much for joining us. And I think the
Thank you.
saving grace for Trinidad and Tobago is the political leadership. If you get the right political leadership that you trust and has the interest of the people and have the capacity, you will see a change. But unless that is done, don't worry. If you go, don't be mad, and don't blame anybody. You
Mhm.
make a choice.
Mhm.
All right, David, according to Darius, I'm so confused. David, thank you so much for listening. Thank you for Mr. Prasad, Simangal, all the listeners who listening on to us today on a very, very controversial but very important topic. Something that I guess we try to stay away from, but it is the reality of Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you so much for joining us. And next week we're going to have another great show dealing with the energy in the energy sector. And Mr. Figueroa, again, thank you from the people of Trinidad and Tobago for your love of your country.
Always a pleasure being with you.
Okay, all right, take care. Okay,
Thank you,
David.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Figueroa. Thank you, Karen. It's
Thank,
been highly, highly interesting.
thank you, sir. Thank you.
All right, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right.
So that's it for today's edition of Hard Talk with host Karen Nunez Tesheira, our special guest, Mr. Darius Figueroa. And of course, Karen will be back next Monday